They didn't have 15 staff to do all those things. And so she wanted to know how to jump in and do those kind of ministries, because at her last church, she had always stayed and cleaned up. And so she did indeed, even in spite of my mistakes, want to come back the second week. Between the first and the second week, she got a welcome letter, like usually happens. We change ours based on what we know about the person. And either myself or Crystal Nwachu, who was my coworker, answered them. So even though I had met Chidi, I had Crystal do it because Crystal was also Nigerian. As it turned out, Chidima was, and I wanted Chidima to know there were other Nigerian folks in the congregation. She showed up again the next week and immediately wanted to do something. And so we got her greeting, and it turned out that helping with the lunches around funerals or after church was her thing. And because she had been in lots of churches before, she wanted to join right away. It turned out she's only temporarily working as a nursing assistant because it's her husband's turn to get the first academic job, with both of them having newly minted PhDs. So I got to be really careful about my assumptions, was one of the things I learned there. My second person, and both of these folks have since gone on to become members and get really involved, is Jill. The way I found Jill is the backdoor kind of thing. We were looking through the rolls at who we hadn't seen in church for a while and trying to reach out to people and contact them. So Jill, it turned out, was one of those parent of a youth group kids. So I didn't know if she'd ever actually been in church. So I routinely would barrage the youth director every month or so with names of people that I'd come up with to say, have they ever been to church, or do we just have their name because they signed a permission slip? And so both youth workers told me, oh no, we hardly ever see Jill and her husband because he's kind of a famous scientist. He worked on the Dolly the sheep genetics project. So he's traveling all over the place. They moved to Hopkins for that project. You won't see her. Well, right after asking, one of those Holy Spirit things happened where she showed up to 3 things in a row. So I just did a flaming extrovert Holy Spirit thing and said, hey, Jill, I had just seen your name on a piece of paper and I didn't know whether you were here. And all of a sudden you signed up for 3 things. So I'm just wondering if there was a life change. And I meant your husband stopped traveling or something, was there a life change that brought you? A little bit of tears begin. And then she matter-of-factly says, well, we just got divorced and I felt like I needed to come back to church. And the youth directors had never heard that from her kids, who were still involved at that point, one of those. And so it took asking that next level of question, which I felt like I could. I have now recruited myself a best friend. She's getting remarried, and I'm doing a religious non-official ceremony for them in England this summer. So that one's turned out really well for me as well as for everybody else. But Jill was that perfect combination of God was actually doing a new work in her life and somebody asked her about it. And we were working the system behind the scenes of clearing out the roles that we all try to do. So there you get a little glimpse of how the systems work, or things work at Central. And I probably have 3 more minutes. If anybody wants to ask me a question, that could be my last 3.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
I have a question.
Yes, Nancy.
You're about to turn me back on. I'm eating supper. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know, of those 2 encounters, which are good stories, what are the takeaway points? What did you learn? What should we learn from your stories?
Yeah. I think one of the things is we have to have people who are not afraid to go talk to people. And I know at a lot of churches it is deacons who take on these things, but when I worked with Chestnut Grove, much smaller church last summer, one of the things we quickly realized is most of their current deacons, that's not their personality to be the people who are going to go up, or they're busy arranging the coffee hour or checking on somebody who's sick, and they didn't have time to be at the back door to grab folks before they slid out during the last hymn or the postlude. So one of the things the deacons did was figure out that they needed other people with different personality types. And so for me, when it's not me, I've recruited a scout team, which I can talk about more later. And also I learned that it's really important to keep scouring the rolls and knowing the stories of the people on on the rolls. And with TD, I think it was important for me to acknowledge that I have some serious shortcomings, and it's important to get some other people in there. She still loves me. I've earned the title of Ma now from her, which I know is a term of respect. So I love that. But, you know, she was very gracious with my mistakes.
Thank you. It is, oh, I lost my thought.
Save it for after everybody else goes.
Yeah.
Write it down and we'll talk about
Hopefully
it.
it'll come back.
Any other questions for Kathy right now before we
Oh, I got some.
hear
I've got
more stories? Okay. All right. Heather, I'd love to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited because Nancy is from my church, so she can jump in and correct me if I make any mistakes, which I would appreciate greatly. I'm Heather Russell. I am the Director of Formation at First Pres of Westminster, Maryland, so out 795 from Baltimore. And we recently, well, I should say, it's not that recent actually. We pre-COVID at our church had an inclusion team that was mostly focused on disability inclusion and sort of accessibility of our church in all the different ways that that can be applied. And then COVID happened, and so it's sort of reforming now. But we are really blessed to have several children, really a lot of children who are neurospicy, as we like to call them. We have a few with Down syndrome. We have lots with autism and ADHD, and other, other things like that. And so we sort of worked towards including them fully, and kind of we in the formation team, in the Christian formation team, we really refer to them as leaders, and all of our children actually as leaders. And we really kind of tried to work on programming and opportunities for them with that in mind. And so one of our elders for formation is a parent of one of these kiddos with Down syndrome, and he is a freshman in high school. And it is really difficult to find authentic friendship and relationship, especially romantic relationship, when you are one of these kids. And so this mama had a real heart for this work. And so we applied for a grant from the Presbytery, and we decided to launch this new program. And it is called Inclusive Pathways, Fostering Friendships. And we are in the process of launching it currently to teens, so high school age, but also up to age 21 for people who might be in the disabled community who are still in high school at that age. And the idea is that we're going to form small groups of kids who are neurotypical and neurospicy and disabled and non-disabled peers around affinity, so interests, shared interests. And we will have events next year throughout the school year where these kids can experience, hopefully, authentic friendship instead of sort of this helping model of, oh, neurotypical kiddo, you're offering yourself in this like lovely way to this poor, lower than you person. And we're really trying to undo that thinking with this program. So that's one big thing that has recently been happening. But we also took a lot of time to think about the different needs of all people in our space and how we can accommodate, different learning styles, different processing styles and things like that. And so we have a lot of different options that I think people appreciate. Yeah, that was not 10 minutes, but.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Heather. I'm curious, like, how do you decide which affinities or which like interests to shape the groups around?
Yeah, it's tough because we don't know who's coming yet. So we developed, we have a steering team and we've been brainstorming a whole lot. And we just basically put on our application Google form, every sort of interest we could think of for teenagers, video games and sports and artwork and music and just everything. Um, and it's just sort of and we already have, I think, 4 participants who all identify as disabled. And so that's really encouraging. I do feel like it's a pretty unique offering. So we're really hopeful that, it's gonna be good and go well. And I've had a lot of deacons say that they are ready to help with these events and be supportive in that way. So, yeah.
Heather, I have an idea.
Ooh, love
So we
it.
could talk later. But we have had a scout troop at our church for many, many, many years. And we've had it no longer is at our church, but we had a young man with Down syndrome in our scout troop who wanted to become an Eagle Scout. And so the leaders worked with him, and he actually is now 32 and will become an Eagle Scout next week.
Wow,
He
that's
he has completed all the requirements and is going to be an Eagle Scout. And then I asked him what he's going to do when he completes his Eagle, and he says, "I'm going to retire." But he is very extroverted and loves to talk in front of people and would probably be a good group leader for something that you might be doing. And very lovely person and loves to help people. So it might be somebody you could use as a resource.
That would be amazing. Will you send me his info or put me in touch with him?
I can do that.
Nothing more than to have friends in leadership,
Can-
from all sorts. So that would be great.
Can you share with the group some of the things that we do, like just on our regular service for inclusiveness and to help with those with challenges?
Sure. Well, one thing that has helped is we invested in a door opener for one of our entrances. So that was a good first step. We do have some other challenges with people with physical disabilities that we haven't been able to address yet, but those are on our radar as well. We've also installed a playground in our sanctuary. So in the back of the sanctuary, there's a sound booth and kind of this natural little triangular area that was sort of just a extra pews sort of space. And so I went in and cleared that out and put some fun things back there. So there's a beanbag chair and a bookshelf with books and quiet toys, a baby doll that the kids love to play with, and just some space on the floor where kids can move around. And I'll tell you, like my own 9-year-old son uses it on a weekly basis. We definitely don't always have the littlest kids in there. And we have a sign that explains that it is not just for little kids, that it's for anyone who would like to use it. And it's been really a big blessing. I think people were pretty worried about it when it first went in, that it would be disruptive. But I think people generally have embraced it at this point. So that's been great. We also have put pew cards in our like hymnal racks. And I actually did this at my last church too, that just really explicitly say we welcome children and their noises and their movements and their joyousness and all of that they are and all that they bring us. And I know I've heard from people that really not only helped them to deal with the noises and the movement of children, but also felt permissive to come, and sort of show up as they are. We have plenty of grown-ups who really like fidgets, for example, who maybe have ADHD or whatever whatever they might be dealing with. And so, we encourage, people to come as they are. And yeah. What else, Nancy? Tell me what else.
I was thinking, you said fidgets, so you have the worship bags that have a fidget thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something that they can play with, and we have certainly the headphones and our bulletins we have marked with pictures for those people that are better with the pictures rather than the words. And what else have we done? We have hearing devices for those that need them, amplification system, but the other headphones are for noise reduction. I think, I believe.
Yeah.
So just those kinds of things. And I think we have worked hard on trying to help our congregation to be more accepting and loving towards people that are different from them. And I see that all the time because I sit in the choir up in the front and I can see how people respond. And with the children's or the moment for all God's children, when they come up, there's somebody's taking the little ones by their hands or taking them back to their seats, and the ones that are moving a lot and crawling around, somebody from the choir might go sit with them, or so I think working on the attitude of the congregation has been helpful as well.
Yeah, and I feel like that's come from just education and sharing information from the pulpit, which has been really great. And also from me when I'm in leadership, but also in print and also, in newsletters and also in emails. Like we really take the time, I think, to be intentional about that. And it's really made a big difference.
Well, I think when you lead anything in the front, but especially the children's moment, or Pastor Matthew, you both demonstrate to the congregation how to be loving and accepting, and I think that's been huge. So thank you.
So glad you're here, Nancy. You were such a big help.
Like a Heather support group going on here.
Yeah, I love it.
Heather, what is that group called? It's called Inclusive Pathways. What else did you say?
Actually, can I share, Michelle? Do we have that turned on? Yes.
Let me see.
I think you do.
I think so. I think you should be able to share. Yep.
Okay. Of course, I did the wrong window, but here, I have the flyer pulled up because I thought it might be helpful. Here it is. Inclusive Pathways, Fostering Friendships. And the reason why, so the overall program is called Inclusive Pathways. We're going to have multiple phases of this. And thank you, Jean, for saying this, because it made me remember that I wanted to share that we also have a phase coming down the road later on, if hopefully this program is a success, where we will be sharing like training opportunities for other faith communities who want to be more inclusive or to offer a program like this. And I will also point out here next to the little feet, this program is secular. It is actually not a religious program, but the other phases of the program would be more focused on religious communities. So this is sort of a lot of writing, but I just thought I would share kind of what we're sharing with people to try and recruit teenagers for this program.
That would even be great for younger children too.
Yeah, I think we've talked in the group about that, and my experience with our younger children in the church has been that they have a much easier time. They just have a lot less bias built up against people who are different from them. And so they really do form authentic friendships with all of the kiddos that they know and that they have. And so I hear you on that. And also I think we felt like, this teen population is really, because once a disabled teen, graduates from high school, there's a lot less support. There's a lot less offerings. There's a lot less structure, just everything kind of, falls away for them in a lot of ways. And so also there are a lot of churches, like especially more non-denominational, bigger churches in our area here in Westminster, who offer programs like this, but they're completely segregated from their neurotypical community. And we really wanted to offer something that was not that. So, yeah.
I think that's great, because I imagine those teens in the everyday classroom face a lot of challenges that way. So if the church can be a support like that, I think that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. We hope that it's going to work. So pray for us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you, Nancy, for both of your insights and for the engagement that you all are doing in this way. I can tell that you're deeply listening to your community and trying to find ways to meet these needs and build connection and make the worship space and the and even small group space to a welcoming space for everybody. So I look forward to hearing more about it as it takes shape.
Yeah, and you will.
Yes, I will.
Because of the grant.
Yes. Oh. All right, Jen, you have a wealth of wisdom when it comes to hospitality and welcome. So in the various contexts that you've served in and the communities that you pastor. So do you have any stories that you'd like to share about ways that you've been intentional about hospitality in your ministries?
So I didn't want to out anybody. I just found out that I was doing this a little bit ago. So I was trying to think a little bit about our community, which I'm going to focus on the Slate community, because I think they have a lot to tell us about hospitality. Kathy actually was our seminary intern. Yay, so you can chime in. So we are a tri-denominational new worshiping community. So today actually I had a meeting with one of my bishops, which is the Delaware Maryland Synod bishop at 10 a.m. the same time as Presbytery, which is why my camera was off, because the bishop took precedence. Come on, people. So we're Episcopal, Lutheran, and Presbyterian. And our community is very diverse. We have a 90-year-old retired pastor who actually is a Methodist retired pastor.
Wow.
We have folks who are trans and queer. We have folks who are formerly incarcerated and who are now incarcerated. We have jailhouse Muslims. We have Messianic Jews. We have folks who wear their MAGA hats and were on the Capitol steps on January 6th.
Oh my gosh.
Story. And then I have folks that stand with the women in Black every Friday protesting war. I have folks that were that identify themselves as diehard Promised Land Jews and those who are protesting for free Gaza. So we gather every Monday night. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't agree, but we always stay at the table. And I think that's kind of what hospitality works like. So when I was trying to think about all of our kind of our guiding principles, the one that is our major guiding principle is this: everyone is welcome, but not all behaviors are welcome. Hospitality includes boundaries. It's not passive. It protects the community. The second one is God's kingdom is not an echo chamber. If heaven includes everyone, we better start listening and learning to love each other now. My biggest thing about this echo chamber thing is I have a lot of folks who fall down these YouTube rabbit holes with algorithms. And we are set up to divide one another. And if we were to only welcome folks that believe and thought like us, then there's never a place for them to be outside of their echo chamber. And that goes for me too, of being, I'm pretty liberal. And I need to be outside of my echo chamber. I need to have people who are challenging me. And so I'll leave it there. My third one that I wrote down is hospitality is holy disruption. It stretches us, it challenges our categories, and I believe it's kind of where transformation begins. My fourth thing that I wrote down is we're not called to agree, we're called to belong. Belonging isn't about sameness, it's about being seen and staying connected. My fifth one is if your table is only comfortable for you, it's definitely not big enough. Radical welcome means letting go of control and comfort to make space for others. Number 6, hospitality isn't about being nice, it's about being real. We really value authenticity. It's deeper than politeness, it's truth telling, it's care, and it's staying in for those really hard conversations. Number 7, welcome doesn't stop at the door. Hospitality is also how we respond to conflict, how we honor each other's traumas, and how we share power. Number 8, I only have 10, by the way. Hospitality is a spiritual discipline. It's not a personality trait. You don't have to be bubbly. You don't have to be an extrovert, though obviously Kathy and I are extroverts. You just have to be intentional. Number 9, radical welcome isn't about equal treatment. It's about equitable care. Everyone gets what they need to show up to be whole. And that's not the same thing for every person. And number 10, sometimes the most radical hospitality comes from the margins. Pay attention to who is doing the welcoming. It's often the ones who have been left out. It's my neurospicy folks. Yeah, those have been excluded. So those are some of my quick learnings that I've had through the Slate Project. And I could give you lots of stories. God knows I got stories. But yeah, that's a little bit. Any questions?
The chat would send those, please.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, Kathy put in the chat, please like share those with the group.
Yes,
You're like 10 hospitality learnings. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think the way you distilled that was really like helpful. Just to hear them in like sound bites is really great because it makes it like easy as like a takeaway thought. And the like I appreciated the way that you debunk the myth that only extroverts can be like welcoming. And the way that you like observed who was doing the welcome in the space of Slate and like what that looks like for the people who've been either excluded or like explicitly told they don't belong, like or left out socially. Like they are they're embodying that hospitality at Slate and welcoming other people in, which is really lovely, rather than perpetuating that feeling of exclusion, rather than saying, oh, I belong here and so I want to protect that. They're instead like expanding the table, so to speak. It's like really beautiful.
They're the best ones. Our Slate folks are the best ones at inviting other people around the table. I mean, that's how we get new folks, is from their invitation to other people.
What was the name of your group again?
We're called the Slate Project, and we're a new worshiping community, but we've been around for 10 plus years. And we are a mission of the Delaware, Maryland Synod, the Episcopal Church, the Diocese of Maryland, and Baltimore Presbytery.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I'll be so interested to know how that even got started, but that's cool. And it would be really great if you could send out your bullet points, because I was trying to take notes and I have written down 5 times. Radical welcome is, but I want the rest of the sentence.
Yes, I will put those in the chat for you.
Okay, perfect. Are there other questions for Jen?
I have
oh yes, go ahead, Jane.
Do you meet face to face or on Zoom?
So, oh my gosh, that is such a great thing, because what I didn't mention is that we have different worshiping communities. So we have our folks meet face to face. We meet in borrowed space, actually. So we meet at the Diocese of Maryland at the Cathedral of the Incarnation on Monday nights, and then Tuesday mornings we meet on North Avenue at a little spot called Nancy by Snack. But we also are a digital community. we used to meet on Twitter, then X, and now we are looking into other places and spaces to meet. So yeah, we are someone who we were one of the first people to actually think and believe that you could be in community on social media.
Mhm. Now, how do you manage the connection with those who are in prison?
Great question. So our guy that just went to prison is just newly there.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. You know, for things. And so that'll be interesting. We've not had that situation before. The good thing is that because we're part of the Delaware Maryland Synod, they actually have prison ministry. St. Didymus. I know, yeah, right. I'm right when I said that, right? We actually just met, all the new worshiping communities, including them, just met this morning. And so that was my 10 o'clock bishop meeting. And so I can actually refer him to them, and so that he can be included as part of their community. And that goes for anyone, right? So if any of you have folks that happen to be in prison, we can connect them to other other worshiping communities where they can get the support and networking that they need and advocacy that they need.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's the best part about being tri-denominational. I will really truly say that is just the number of connections that you just kind of fall into. It's amazing. I really do love that we are crossing denominational bounds, which is again another hospitality thing. I think we often fear that if we cross over and partner with another church, that they're gonna like steal our sheep, rather than seeing that, you know, that they're not our sheep, they're God's sheep, and we're just like there to help tend them. And we just want to make sure that they all get to know the master's voice. And so how can we better help them with that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Something else that you named in your list was that like hospitality includes boundaries. That like radical hospitality includes boundaries, and boundaries are like part of that. And you talked about radical hospitality not being passive. I was wondering if you could say a little more about that.
So right now I'm dealing with a particular person, and I don't know where this video is going to go. So I feel like I have to like speak in like generalities. And he's been sucked actually into, he was formerly homeless and was actually staying at one of the hotels downtown that was converted, you know, into like housing. And then Time, that was the organization that helped get him placed. And he's got a great place now. He's up in like eastern side of Waverly. No, western side of Waverly, north, south, western side of Waverly. And he's a night owl, and he just gets really, he just can't sleep sometimes. He's just like overstimulated, and he fell down into this like YouTube echo chamber talking about Muslim terrorists and how basically all Muslims are terrorists. Like
Oh my gosh.
I kid you not. And he will write these things, like these email rampages that are just completely hateful. And so then I have to sit down and have a sit down conversation with him and rebuttal him through email as well, telling him that is not the behavior that we welcome here. Like that's not the speak and the conversation or the words. That's not the love of God that we want to espouse here, or that's not the love of God. And so those are some of the harder conversations, saying like that's not welcomed. You can't say that. And yeah. I welcome you as a person, but I don't welcome that hate talk and those generalizations about individuals around our table. We talk about ways that we can bring peace, not ways that tear down. So that's one conversation. We've had a few things that have kind of almost gone into a shouting match between one of our older members and one of our younger members, where he was listening to solve rather than listening to be present. And so now one of our things that we say is, are you sharing so that someone will listen to you, or are you sharing because you are seeking solutions? Right. So clarity, asking clarifying questions of why people are sharing and what they need in that space, and being direct about that, right? Not assuming that when someone shares that their roommate's being a jerk, that they're asking us to give solutions on how to solve the roommate problem. Or that they can't stay within their budget, so they want us to write a budget for them. Right? They're just sharing out their frustration and what they're feeling, and we're listening to be a listening ear, right? Just to be supportive, not to always solve.
Do you actually worship together too? It sounds like it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, around the table. All of that
Okay.
happens within an hour and a half. Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. So while we're eating dinner is normally where the conversation kind of happens, and things bubble up, and then we worship together. We did a whole series on what does it mean to be prophetic, and words that speak wisdom, and when you don't listen to the prophets, kind of what happens. And so that we had a lot of things stir up there with folks, and how they thought the world was. And that's, that also is very, you can see where we are with our group of people, the type of folks we have. It was very, it can be very headbutting at times. But I think also very, I don't know, just a very unique community. And I think a very valuable community. I wouldn't change anything about it. It's very difficult to manage. And I say manage because there's a lot of people that do need a lot of help. But I do think it's a very a loving community that's really concerned. Like when someone doesn't show up, they're like, well, where's so-and-so? And you're like, I thought wow, really? Because you were just going after him because he ate the last steak, because we had steak on Monday. Somebody made us steaks. I know, steaks, steaks. I thought you were upset because he had got the extra steak, and they're like, well, I'm worried about him still. And so I think that just kind of shows the community. Kathy, did you want to say anything about the community real quick before we go?
Church, so Mr. Magda makes his way around to whatever church has free food on a Sunday.
So when Central had picnics in the summer, Mr. Magda would come to Central, and he was not the only person doing this, but he, among a few others, would want to just take 20 hot dogs or whatever to go. And so the temptation of the picnic leadership for the first few weeks was to make a general announcement to the whole group about what you could take or not take, because they wanted to avoid getting into conflict with anybody, or particularly offending somebody who maybe had some extra spiciness going on. Not Mr. Maga, but the other person who was taking a lot. And so it was really important to push into being relational about that, but also solving the problem. So I went and got a bunch of take-home containers like Jen does at Slate, and we announced to the whole group that if they needed to take some food home at the end of everybody at both services having been there, they could take leftovers that would fit in a container, but also to go directly to the people who were doing it and talk about that not being hospitable, and why not. And I think particularly at the big church, the temptation is, well, let's come up with a system for it and just announce it, instead of taking it on relationally and treating them like we would anybody who wasn't extra spicy, and just talking to them about it.
I think that's a really good point, right? Like the hospitality part in that is knowing the boundaries, right? And knowing like, okay, you're welcome to take as much food, and we're asking that you take it after the meal, right? So what are the expectations, right? Not that those expectations have to be met, but at least they're clearly laid out for folks.
Yeah, and that one brought up a whole other need for me that I hadn't really been thinking about, was the people coming after our later service, which was the traditional one. Many of them were older and don't cook anymore, or were starting to have mobility needs. And so it had not even occurred to me until these other folks, my spicy people, were taking too much, food home or too early or whatever, but providing the containers, we also just provided like at least one dinner for my older folks who weren't necessarily cooking anymore. So I was grateful that the thing that started out to be a problem brought a normal need in the church that I hadn't been thinking about.
Jen, how many do you have at each of the gatherings?
That's a great question. They circle in. So anywhere between 10 and 12. But it could be a different 10 or 12 every single week, except I publish the menu, which maybe I shouldn't, Sunday night. And some folks choose based upon the menu. Steak was very popular.
Oh yes, I'm sure that was a crowd pleaser.
Well, that's the other thing I would say. If you're anywhere close to Jen, she welcomes leftovers. So anytime I bought too much for a lunch at Central, I would immediately text and say, do you need? Because I have.
So we also have like gluten-free options. We also have vegetarian options, because we have folks that have different dietary situations as well. So that's also about hospitality, which I don't know if we've gotten into yet. Maybe Michelle, you'll touch on that because you are very familiar with that. But yeah, that's something else that we also take in consideration.
Yeah.
Thank you. Boy, it's a lot of information. Don't forget to publish your list.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
Nancy, I know where
Just
to
go
find you,
visit
so.
on a Monday night or a Tuesday lunch and see it for yourself.
Heather, were you about to say something?
I just said, Nancy, I know where to find her. So
Oh.
Jen, we can get Jen.
Yes. Yes, you do.
Also, can I just shout out Slate for, and I don't know if you guys still do this, maybe it fell off my radar, but back in the day, there was also like some really creative and wonderful ways to engage with the community through like a hashtag Lenten thing, or like, just sort of a digital. And again, this was like really cutting edge when you guys were doing it. It was not 2 years ago, it was like 10 years ago. So I just always really appreciated that too, as like an option for people who work in churches or who serve, heavily in churches and aren't maybe feeling so worshipful, that there were these other options through Slate. I know Katie Cashin, my friend, came for a long time to dinner church at Slate. So yeah, like it's such a good thing.
So
Good
you can
job,
find
Jen.
us on TikTok, and we're doing a series on called Neighborly, where we're like reclaiming Mr. Rogers and doing some stuff with that, which has kind of been kind of fun. So yeah, we're out trying on a lot of different things. So yeah, check us out.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to share a few like thoughts about the like idea of hospitality with you all. I served a congregation in Philadelphia for my first call, and it was a new worshiping community in 2004, and so they just turned 20 last year. So kind of like how Slate is a new worshiping community but is 10 plus years old. They were a congregation that closed their doors when they had 8 members on the rolls left, and they were 2 blocks from City Hall in Center City, Philadelphia, across the street from the Kimmel Center, right in the heart of everything. But they were convinced that the way to be welcoming was to assimilate everyone who came in the door and say, this is how we do church. This is what it means to be a church. you are welcome if you conform to our idea of church and how to be a proper church member. They were a very traditional Presbyterian congregation with deep historic roots. The building had been funded by Wanamaker himself. It was a gorgeous cathedral. But because of their like imagination or lack of imagination, depending on how you think about it, they could not sustain themselves. And there was a second career pastor who decided that it was a true loss that there was no PCUSA church 2 blocks from City Hall in the middle of the city in the arts district, which in what had become a hub for a music school, an arts university, and a lot of political engagement and various theaters and galleries. That there were people all over the place, like looking for meaning and looking for a place to worship. And they decided to take a risk. The Presbytery had been renting out the majority of the building to the local arts university to simply just pay the bills. And they were using the building as classroom space, rehearsal space, but there was no worshiping community in the building anymore. So they thought, well, it's not much of a risk for us, for this person who's a second career like pastor whose first career was in finance, so he can afford to not work for a year. So it was all very like circumstantially like providential in a lot of ways, but like he was able to do that, like basically say, I'm going to work for free for a year before we can like make this happen. And he and a small group of people decided that their like radical hospitality approach would be to like walk up to strangers on Broad Street and hand them an invitation to come to dinner.
I know.
So this is in like 2003, 2004. And they did that. They walked up to business people and bike messengers and art students and actors and anyone who walked down the street who would look them in the eye and handed them an invitation to dinner. And they just thought, whoever walks in the door is who God is calling us to pastor. Like whoever comes in the door is going to be like the person that we will love and welcome. And they had this big like vision of being a church for like young adults and artists and that sort of thing. But the people who ended up showing up, of course, for a free meal were the people who were sleeping in the subway underneath that church building. Mm-hmm. The people who were showing up for meals were students who were poor, who needed food, were brand new, like young professionals working in the humanities or working in social services who loved the philosophy, but didn't have a lot of money to give. Like they loved the mission of the church, but they didn't have a lot of money to donate on a regular basis. And they thought, wow, like we are so ill-equipped to pastor a congregation of people who are sleeping on the subway and are recovering addicts and are mentally ill in a visible way. And like, so they had to completely rethink their, like who their, I guess, audience was, so to speak. Like who God brought them was not who they thought they would be pastoring. So they had to really sit down and think like, how does welcome change? Not just who are we going to invite and then see who shows up, but like now that we know who's going to show up, what needs to change about how we welcome people? So they began worshiping in the evening. So at first they were just having dinner together, but then they added a worship service. And that would end with communion, and then from communion they'd go straight to dinner. And so there were some people who were just like, I'm just here for the dinner. That's why I came the first time, and I'm not going to church. So there'd be a crowd of people in the fellowship hall waiting for dinner while the worship service was happening upstairs. And they would be like, and some of them were like the original folks who had shown up that first night or within that first month. And they realized, oh my gosh, they're like, people are getting into fights downstairs. We don't have any, we don't know how to de-escalate conflict. Like people are like bringing all their stuff with them because they're sleeping in the subway. And so we have all these like suitcases and bags and like shopping carts. Like, where do we put everybody's stuff and make sure no one's stuff gets stolen? Because, you know, that's basically their like apartment on wheels. Like, how do we like do this and not tell anyone they can't come or they can't show up how they are? Because that was like really important to them, that they continued to say, you're welcome as you are. And they decided, well, we need to hire a social worker to be on our staff who knows how to work with people who are like visibly like unwell, either like mentally or physically, or like are living on the street. And so they did. They hired a social worker because they said, we are out of our lane, completely out of our lane. And if we're going to continue to welcome who God is bringing through our doors, we need to hire someone who has this skill set, who can teach us how to be better at this. So that was like, so part of the welcome that they really understood was both like paying attention to what God was like doing. They had to really let go of what they expected their new church to be. And then when they did that, they also had to understand their own limitations. Both say, we want to welcome the people who are here. We want to be the kind of church where everyone can be present and be like welcomed. But we need people who have the professional skills too, to help us do this well, so we don't cause more harm. And so we don't like further either the pain or the stigma that these community members may have felt in other religious spaces. The thing about the way the worship service was set up to create a sense of welcome was all of the pastors were trained in explaining each part of the liturgy before we did it. So I was taught and had to memorize specific phrases that we would repeat every single service, that no matter who was leading the service, we all used the same language to describe each part of the service. And when I came to my next call, which was more of a high church Presbyterian setting, very, very different than this like low church context where people would speak out in the middle of the service, or all sorts of like antics would take place. And it was seen as like inappropriate to explain what we were doing. We simply would just do the thing because the thing we were doing was like very important, right? But I would explain at my former call to people who couldn't read or who had not had their prescription for their glasses filled in years and couldn't read the bulletin, that like what we were doing next, because that's what welcome meant. And so it was very counterintuitive for me to shift to this like almost like an ableist mindset where, oh, we're assuming everyone can read. We're assuming everyone can see the page, and we're assuming that everyone knows what we're doing next. And I was in a context where I had to assume where no one knew what we were doing. And like that way no one felt ashamed of either their lack of like access to like learning or medical attention or mental health supports. I guess another thing I will say too is that like we had to like really bust the myth that like hospitality means like safety. I think really, and what I mean by that is like, just like control, safety is an illusion. Like when a diverse group of people are welcomed into a space, all sorts of things can happen. It's like a chemistry experiment. When you bring all these elements together, you don't know if something will like smoke or change colors or combust. And like, that's what happens when you have a group of people who come in with all of their personality quirks and their own like religious backgrounds into a space. And I would experience that most acutely when we would have our weekly meals, our weekday meals. We took all the pews out of the sanctuary so we could feed more people, because the fellowship hall was overflowing at dinner after church on Sundays. And so the congregation decided, well, I guess we don't need these pews because we can't feed everyone. Like, how are we gonna, like, we can't turn people away who are hungry. And most of them are here because they want to eat something. They're not coming upstairs to church. So the pews are empty and the fellowship hall is overflowing. So what if we brought dinner upstairs? What if we took the pews out so we could feed more people? And they did. We would feed 350 people a day. 350 people a day, 7 meals a week. And when someone was greeted in that space, there was no metal detector ever. No one was scanning the bags to see if someone had a gun or a knife or pepper spray with them, because we knew that, like, very likely they did. It was like highly likely, especially the women or the trans people who were coming for meals would have weapons to protect themselves because they were sleeping outside or they felt unsafe. And so often I would just see like the handle of something sticking out of a purse, like not as a like, I'm going to hurt you, but more like, hey, don't mess with me. I just want you to know this is here. Like, I'm not going to hurt you, but like, hey, just like make sure you check yourself a little bit. And I think maybe once or twice we had a like physical altercation during a meal when I was there in the 2 years that I was there, because everyone understood that that kind of behavior was unwelcome and they wanted to be there with each other, and they knew that they would receive the resources and care they needed at that church. And if we had created a culture of fear where we were scanning everything, it would have felt like a jail to many of them, or it would have felt like a place where like they were being judged and where the like street culture that they were living in was unwelcome and was not understood. And so we had to take a risk every time we opened the doors, knowing that we would probably have dozens of weapons in the building on a given day, when we had like that we would have anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 people a day coming into the building to receive resources. And that kind of radical welcome takes a lot of risk. And so it was a very like provocative place to be a newly ordained pastor, because it really changed the way that I thought hospitality looked. I think I had experienced hospitality as creating a really lovely coffee hour and making sure that everyone who was a visitor received a welcome card or received a follow-up call from someone from the congregation during the week. Like, those were the things I was taught in seminary. And it was really fascinating to see like the ways that hospitality was integrated into both like the way we did our liturgy, the way that we welcomed people to our meals, and then the way that the original congregants responded to the people who were coming into their doors. Because I think none of those other radical moments would have been possible if the founding congregants 20 years ago had said, we're not here to pastor those people. Mm. If they had said that, then Broad Street Ministry would never have existed. If they had said, that's not who we want to be around, I don't want to eat dinner with that person, I don't know how to talk to someone who's like off their meds and sleeping in the subway. They didn't do that. It's such a beautiful and very hard thing to do. Like, there are parts of that, like there are other stories I could tell you of like very hard things that happened, that like hard decisions I've had to make around boundaries, or like ways that like hard decisions had to be made. Like, it's definitely not all rainbows and kittens. Like, it's hard, like, but like real like welcome and real care like has both parts in it. Like, it's really like profound the way that it can look. when we are willing to open ourselves up to what God might do in those kinds of relationships. I'm going to pause there. Are there like any questions for me about that like case study, so to speak?
Michelle, excuse me, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And how would you handle it if you were having meals like that, really meant for people who needed the meals? And this is something I've observed. It's like for a food pantry to give out food to the homeless. But on a few occasions, I've seen people pull up, and it's really meant for the surrounding area we are. They'll pull up with Pennsylvania license plates, and they drive up in these vehicles that are newer and more expensive than what I'm driving. And they come up and they will clean out. They have like a little food pantry outside the door. They clear it out and take everything. And one time I did happen to go out as this woman was doing that. And I just said, "Oh, can I help you?" And all of a sudden she was pretending, and I knew that she was not well. All of a sudden she hunched over. How do you handle something like that? When they're really, I don't know if she's turned around and selling the food. And I don't know what she's doing with it.
Yeah. That is a great example of like, what are the like boundaries, right? Of
Boundaries,
like, hospitality. Like, what does that look like? I'll give you an example. We would serve meals, 7 meals a week, but no one could receive seconds. There were no second helpings. Everybody received one meal. They used to have a open salad bar that was part of lunch, and they stopped it before I got there. But the stories I heard about the like behavior at the salad bar was like very like Lord of the Flies, but around like food, because people were like, "Oh, this is a buffet, so I can pick whatever I want." So if there's like hard-boiled eggs or bacon bits or cheese or potato salad, like I'm gonna load up my plate because I can only have one serving of the entree, but I can go to the salad bar and I can load up my bag. So people would bring like sandwich bags or like grocery bags, like the plastic ones, and put food to take later for dinner. And they realized like the intention was like, oh, we want to serve healthy food. We want produce here. We want like nutritious things. We want to serve food that all of us would want to eat and would enjoy at a restaurant or at a family gathering. So that like intent was so good, but the impact was that it like triggered this like scarcity feeling in some of the like guests who would come for lunch, and it was causing more harm because there was no boundary around it. It was just like, here it is. You can take whatever you want. There's no lock. There's no like expiration of when the like salad bar goes away. I mean, it was there for like an hour and a half, but like it would just be it became a place where there was more like relational tension, and then the people who were following the rules would feel very upset that there were others who were not respecting the boundary. And they would say, can you believe this guy? Every time he comes here, we know he's going to go up there in the last 15 minutes of lunch and take the rest of the food. We just know it's going to happen because he does it every single day, because they all know each other. Like a lot of them know each other. Like, oh, here he is again. Like, there's our friend Carl going in for the eggs again. Like, why is he doing that? We told him no yesterday and he's not listening. Like, so the kitchen staff said, we're just taking away the salad bar. We're going to give everybody one salad before lunch comes out. So everybody gets a little salad and that's it. And that like, but what we didn't do was stop people from trading at the tables. So we just, the compromise we made was like, everybody gets one serving of everything. But if you don't want to eat broccoli because you hate broccoli, we're not going to stop someone from giving that to their neighbor who sits next to them. But like, we made sure that like, everyone had equal amounts of access to the food that was available. And then this like was very infrequent, but they had this value at Broad Street where anyone could come for lunch. Like anybody could sit down and have lunch. They wouldn't tell someone they couldn't have lunch based on what they were wearing.
Yeah.
There was no screening process for like income level, or we didn't write down people's names or record their zip code. And we decided not to do that because we wanted to build trust. We were afraid that if we were tracking those kinds of things, that people may not feel as welcome or safe, or like why do they want my information? Like, what are they going to do with it? Or are they going to tell me I can't come back tomorrow because they thought that I was here today? Because there are lots of places that have rules like that, where you can only come once a week for lunch, or you can only receive a pantry bag like once a month. And so you can't come every week, even if you may need groceries every 7 days. So we would occasionally have people who would come in and sit, but usually who didn't look like they needed food. And a lot of the time they were actually like, we would learn later that they were people who were formerly homeless, who were in transitional housing, who finally could take a real shower and had some new clothes, and they were looking for a job, but they couldn't afford a lunch. And so they were coming for lunch in between interviews. And like, that was just so like, that was like, so meaningful to realize, oh my gosh, like I saw this person in a suit and I made assumptions about them, but then I learned later that like my assumptions were wrong. And there were also some people who were like, who had apartments, but who were like had like personality disorders, and who like would sometimes become very afraid and wouldn't stay in their apartment. And so we would like learn as they would cycle, like we would see them like a lot for like a couple of months, and they'd disappear because they'd be back in their apartment and like they'd be stable again. And then they'd come back again. And then sometimes they would show up looking really like well dressed and like well groomed, and then other times they wouldn't. And so like the vulnerabilities of people were like much more evident, but we also had to be like more like both like boundaried and kind in the way that we gave food to people, and the way that we like interacted with people.
Can I jump in when you're done?
Yeah, for sure.
So at Central, one of the places that happened was they do an annual clothing giveaway that's gotten well-known. Please send your people. Like social services tells all their social workers in Baltimore County about it and stuff. And there's at least one woman who we were fairly certain that she was taking everything she could and reselling. And so two things happened. One, they did institute you can only take one. They would also collect suitcases to give away. So, you know, you could take one suitcase, I think, per person, maybe, because you will get families who knew they were clothing all their kids for the next season there. But also when, ironically, one of the people who took all the food at our summer picnics would also volunteer at this, and really she wanted to take a lot of the clothes home, didn't need them. So she questioned the leader about it, and the leader said, I know that one lady is reselling things. And so what we're doing is telling her she can come back at the end and take all the leftovers. But frankly, I'm pretty impressed at her entrepreneurial spirit that this is how she's making some money. So I don't care if she's reselling them.
Wow.
And making a little bit of money to buy Christmas presents for her grandkids.
Wow.
She's like, I don't care. We're Central. We're getting this food. You know, her husband is like a high up partner at the biggest law firm in Baltimore, you know, whatever. They could all, 5 of her kids went to prestigious private schools. She's like, I don't care. Good. She's figured out a way to make some money. And on the car thing, the other thing we figure out often, and Jen could speak way more to this. Yeah, maybe they lived in Pennsylvania and now they're living in their car. So you have to be careful. But what I've learned from Jen is also this is where it's really important to have a network, because this is Baltimore, and So I got
Yes.
taken once. So now I had a practice at Central of calling Jen, and we actually started a spreadsheet called Neighbors in Need, and the head deacon, the woman in the office, me, and Jen and Maria Weatherington, who works in social servicey kind of things, were on it, swapping notes. And so I would text and say, I met a guy named Anthony. He looks like this. He drove this car. He walked up from here. This is his story. Do you know him? And Jen would be like, yeah, he hits us up every other week, or whatever. And the other thing that was important about that particular spreadsheet was we figured out the same people would come and they'd tell their story on Sunday and get something from the deacons, but because the deacons are volunteers and the woman who is the administrator in the office does not come to church there on Sunday, so people weren't hearing the stories of each other. So that sharing of information. Oh, and then we added our security team who lock up the building at night. So people could gather information. And now my son-in-law works for Department of Housing and Community Development in Baltimore County. So I could also say, hey, Karen, have your street outreach people met? Like, and float a name. And of course he can't, give me any information, but he could say, oh, yes, we've met them, or here's a thing that has been offered to them, whatever he was legally allowed to tell me. So the networking around your town
Mhm.
and across churches is
Yeah.
huge there too, along with
So,
not assuming.
so one of the things that I love, one of the by TikToks, you guys, you know me. If you know me, you know I love TikToks. One of the TikTok trends that I really loved was one that began with we listen and we don't judge. And so one of the things that I say about hospitality is you can listen to someone's story. It doesn't cost you anything to listen to their story. And if that story ends with an ask and you don't feel it in your heart to give, you don't have to give. You've given by listening to their story and acknowledging them as a beloved child of God. So I always say, listen to their story. Listen to where their heart is. They are showing up and doing the best they can with whatever they have. Honor that for where they are. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't want them to do better, but right now, this is where they are. Honor that and love them right there where they are.
I think the key also is, I like the word boundary too, and just putting everything outside, and it's like a free for all. There's no one watching it. Versus, yeah, I think before COVID, what they used to do was invite them into like the narthex and talk to them, but that has since stopped. So it's just everything's put outside, and no one's watching to see, or just to make sure someone's not taking everything and then taking from people who really and truly need it. So when they come up.
The watching, the other big part is there's nothing relational that can happen when it's just outside and you aren't
I'm
meeting
sorry.
them. So there's no relationships that can get
Right.
formed if it's just outside. So I
Yeah.
know Babcock's been working on that a lot with redoing whatever they're calling their food.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's
Distributed.
important to have that
Yeah.
relationship or talk to them, find out where they are, and if there's anything else that can be done for them besides food, other resources.
Right. Hospitality is not transactional, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just, drill that into folks, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing with, you're not doing for, you're doing with, you're present with them on this journey.
Yeah.
And that's actually true with all of our kinds of visitors too, right? Even the person who just comes in on a Sunday morning for worship or whatever, like I want it to be transactional. I want them to become a member and volunteer here and give some money and grow in their faith and choose my church over, Heather's, because mine's the bestest ever. I might be an Enneagram 3 who's a little competitive, right? But that's not, it can't be transactional.
No, definitely not. And your comment about that, like both of you about transactional, like welcome, reminded me of the, like how difficult it is to have like class integrated congregations. Like it is so difficult to have like multi-class congregations. And what I mean by that is that it's like, like an example would be like pastoring a congregation that was more like on the outside, like looks more affluent. When I was at Brown Memorial, didn't always mean that everybody had a lot, but everybody wanted to look like they had a lot.
Mhm.
And they, but there were many seniors on fixed incomes in that congregation who would not want to say that they didn't have as much means as their people that they worship next to. But there was still like a high amount of need in the pews, but it was quiet. It was like a quieter need, like that took like trust development and relationship for people to express their need, even if it was as like simple as like needing a ride somewhere, like even that, because they could no longer drive, like that, or like, so there was like this like confluence of both like class and also aging that I experienced there, that like but being welcoming as a congregation means that people feel safe to express their needs, both like longtime members and visitors. I remember like there are occasions where, you know, I would receive cold calls at the church from people asking for like money. Either they would walk up to the office and ask for money, or they would call and leave a message and ask for money, or they'd come to worship and they would just directly ask for it. And they would like, and there were a few community members who would show up regularly on Sundays at Brown Memorial. Everyone knew their names because they would come almost every week to ask for money from people. And oh, bye, Eric. And we had to learn, like I had some church members who would feel guilty and they would just hand that like someone like the cash in their wallet. They wouldn't like refer them to a deacon or to a staff person. Right. Bye, Carol.
Bye.
And so we had to do some educating around like welcome and boundaries can go together, like, and don't give because you feel guilty, like don't give because they're asking, like this person will be coming back and they have other needs that we can help meet, or like other ways we can support them. But instead we would say, you know, next time you see them, say, it's so nice to see you again. I'm going to find like X person for you to talk to. Like, I'm going to go find this staff person or this pastor or this deacon who like is equipped, like essentially like to handle those like kind boundary moments. And then I think now that I'm in a congregation that's smaller with 54 members on the rolls, and so the hospitality piece is sometimes challenging, mostly because everyone knows who the visitors are when they come because it's very obvious. In a larger church, it's easier for a visitor to kind of like melt into the background and be a little more anonymous and like come to worship but not be spoken to if they don't want to be. Like they can really come and go on their own terms. But in a smaller congregation, which I think is one of the benefits really, is that the visitors are known. They are usually greeted.
Yeah.
They are welcomed in a warm way. And that is like a very meaningful thing because it's there's like this, the visibility is much higher. But what I've learned is that like the welcome has to come from a place of like care and not anxiety. Like I often like, there's like a fine line in like my congregation that has like aging members. Most of my members are over 65 and they're very worried about the church's viability when they're no longer there because their children aren't coming to church with them, even though they live locally. Their grandchildren aren't coming to church with them. And they long for children to be in the congregation and young adults to be there. And so when they see a young family, they like, they're like so excited, but their excitement sometimes overwhelms a visitor. So there are some visitors who are like, oh, wow, this is like a lot. Like everyone's saying hi, like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
And so, and then others who are like, this is great. Like I grew up in a small church too. I love this. Like, or the extroverts who love meeting everyone. Like, they're like, great. I just met a whole group of friends. I just made a whole bunch of friends this morning. I'm going to be back next week. But like, it reminds, this was a funny like example that came to mind, but I'm thinking of like the way that, going on a date with someone you must be curious but not desperate. It's like a similar feeling when a visitor comes to church. Like you must be curious but not like desperate for them to be a part of your community, and to like welcome them in a way that's like, I would love to get to know you. Thank you for being here. Like and people, even if like those things aren't spoken, they rarely are. The like feeling can like people can feel it. They can feel it when they come in. And I know that that's like a very like simple thing, but like I often won't, like in some churches, they will ask the visitors to stand and wave to everyone. Like, so that way everyone knows who they are. I attended a church like that in college. And when I was a college student and I was in this church for the first time, I was like 19 and I'm standing up and like looking at all these strangers. And I was like, I am so nervous. Like I do, I do not enjoy, enjoy doing this. But yeah, like it was like an attempt to be welcoming and yet but also like could have been done in a different like way. So I think there are like simple ways, like even on a Sunday practically, that we can think about like, oh, like how do we greet new people? Like how are we following up with them? Like how is it part of our service or not? Like, yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, you talked about the blind date thing. The thing I thought of was the first time
Yeah.
you bring your partner to a family reunion, and maybe you're already engaged, maybe you just started dating, whatever, but like that thing of wanting to be pretty chill as one of the older aunties, now or whatever, of making sure that I meet them, but not that I sit down next to them, and grill them for their whole life story, or whatever. A lot of the bigger churches that have done research on all this say people often don't want to give you any information on their first visit. Their first visit is really just checking you out. So to me, it's really important not to push for information, but to maybe learn one thing about them if they're willing to stop and talk. So I had referenced that I have a secret army of scouts. I did have one guy who used to refer to himself as a hunter, so we had to teach them to use maybe the word scout instead. But we have a secret scout team, in that they're not people wearing name tags. They're not the official greeters. They're not chasing you with the welcome bag, or any of that. On the traditional side, one was a choir spouse, and he was just always there early because he and his wife wanted to drive to church together. She was also a deacon. So because he was there early, he kind of made it his job to notice if anybody was new, and particularly he watched for college students, who didn't necessarily love the traditional service unless they were music students, but that was the one they woke up for in time. And then on the contemporary side, where it's really big, because I was often standing in the back in the when I wasn't a pastor, and I'd be up kind of in the sound booth, or Central has some cameras that are elevated. So I would go up there and I could sort of scan and see anybody who was new. And I have about 4 people that I could text and say, hey, Dan, there is a new person in the row behind you and slightly to your left. Can you go talk to them at the greeting time? And I even got one guy to start actually looking at his phone, who normally wouldn't. Bring it in, just like for that reason, because I knew he was one of my most extroverted people, but he wouldn't notice somebody behind him or whatever. So that way it wasn't my connections desk person like chasing them down. It was just person in the pew near them. And then if I was going to be away, I started a spreadsheet or told them they could text me if they met anybody. And one of our best guys actually was on the worship team, but he noticed that because he was on the worship team, he could see everybody who was there. So he would come down from the stage instead of gabbing with the other musicians and try to meet the person he noticed, or text me and say, did you notice that woman sitting all the way to the left? Because he saw her when the rest of us couldn't. But yeah, I think Rob and I are getting such a different lens now because we're visiting churches not just in the Presbytery. They aren't all Presbyterian. Jen, you can ask me later if you want to know how Havenwood did. Because we're just there. But it's really interesting me noticing how, again, as flaming extrovert and how Rob feels. But Rob generally doesn't want to go back to someplace introvert that he is if nobody says anything to him the whole morning, particularly if it's small enough.
Yeah.
That they should. And it's funny to think, like, one of my favorite things, because I'm old and have to pee all the time, is if somebody notices me looking around and they will say, hey, were you wondering where the bathrooms were? Or they see me with my dripping raincoat. Were you wondering? They don't ask me to fill out a connection card. They don't try to introduce me to Jen, bye, Julie. But they notice that I might have a need that could.
Yeah, Jesus meets people where they are, right? I don't think we really talked about Jesus much, but I love Jesus. Jesus met people where they were, right? He met them at wells, he met them on roads and tack booths. He saw them.
Look for that Zacchaeus. If we had gotten to there, say Zacchaeus is my key story for welcoming, because I
Yes.
hit a tree and noticed a guy.
You what?
Looked up in a tree and noticed a guy, and then he also wanted to do hospitality in the guy's space. So Zacchaeus is like, that would be 3 months of relationship for us with somebody, right? But he wants to go to his house. He wants to figure out who his friends are too and talk to them.
Right. Yeah. I know it is after 8. I wanted to ask you all to think about application as we end tonight. Are there things that you have heard that you would like to bring back to your deacons and to your own welcome team or congregational care team?
I love the one about the inclusive pathways, fostering friendship. My daughter is actually the director of religious education at our church, so we work a lot together. And I think that's something I'm going to approach her about, only because, and it's more like the middle school children who I think could really benefit from something like that a lot. The other thing, the one point that came across, and I know there's a lot of talk about deacons as extroverts. We have 9 deacons. We can have up to 12 deacons, which they're trying to do for next year. Probably half are extroverts, half are introverts. But I think that is a good blend, because the ones who aren't the ones to go out are the ones who are sending cards, who are making the phone calls. So I think to have all deacons that are all extroverts could be too much, but I think you need a good blend of other personalities for deacons.
Yeah.
Jeannie said, is it Jeannie or Janine?
Jean, either one. I go by anything.
To piggyback on that, at Havenwood, we do 1-year deacon terms for folks that are 90 plus. So we have 93-year-olds.
Wow.
That are deacons. And then they can do a 2nd year or a 3rd year or a 4th year. We have one 94-year-old that's on their 4th term or their 4th year. But yeah, we allow them to do 1-year terms as elder or as deacon, because we want to make sure that, they're planning out their seasons.
Yeah.
And who wants to plan out, 3 years? Let's just plan out a year. So
I think that's great.
Meeting people where they are, right, in their seasons of
Yeah.
life. And that might also be true for young moms who say, I can be a deacon for 1 year, but I don't know when my kid turns 2, it could be horrible. So I'm just willing to commit while they're 1.
This past year was the first time we brought in younger people. We have two deacons who are in probably their early 30s. So that has been wonderful. I am trying so hard to bring men in as deacons. And it's been probably in the history of the church, it's always been women. So that is one of my goals. And it's not going well. So.
Oh
well.
I have a whole long list of things. I have I've taken lots of notes, and I think I need to sit and process a lot of it. I think that I like the term radical welcome, and I think that's something that we need to be. We are a very friendly, welcoming congregation, and we usually can tell when there's a visitor or a new person, and they usually are approached by a couple of people, and we try, but I don't think we're intentional about it. I think it's just the extrovert personalities that are happening there. I think we need to be more intentional about our welcoming. So there's a lot of ideas here that I think that I can take. And I feel the need to just kind of overhaul our whole board of deacons right now. So Heather, don't tell anybody.
Well, I was just gonna say, my daughter, my oldest child who's graduating college tomorrow, is one of our deacons, and she is, I think, designated, Nancy, is that correct, as the youth deacon? Like
Yes.
she was, started when she was in college, but there have been high school deacons on our deacons board as well. Our deacons are very different from other churches, though. Like, what they do is wildly different from other churches that I've been familiar with. So that's interesting too for us. But yeah, I do think I agree with you, Nancy. I think it could always be better, right? Like, we could always be more
Totally.
intentional. So
Can you email me description of how you do that? Candidate over here trying to soak up all the models.
fellow candidate Kathy, yes, absolutely.
Well, and I think, our don't get me started on it, but we have 12 on each of our boards, and I think that that's a lot of people to try to manage it, and I don't think they're all actual leaders and are just kind of sitting in that chair. And so I think it's time to look at some of that, and maybe it's time to spruce it up a bit. But the other concept that just was really interesting to me was hospitality is not transactional.
Mhm.
And I think that we're stuck on that. I think we need to do something to show our hospitality, and it's yeah, and so I got that to think about. In a lot of things about food. Seems like it all kind of goes around food. So why is food and hospitality connected? But some of the things about, like I wrote down, about everybody comes to the table, and we might not all agree, but we stay at the table. And I love that concept. So I just need to really think about all of this for a while. But I learned an incredible amount. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any people who shared stories, feel like you learned or gleaned anything?
I just love hearing stories. So thank you for inviting me. And yeah, what a precious thing it is to have space to do that. And I'm just so grateful for that time. So yeah, thanks for everybody for sharing.
Yeah, same. I just love adding to my vaults of stories and examples because you don't know when it's gonna pop up.
Yeah.
There are probably 50 people at Central who know who Jen is now, or Slate, just because I interned with her and I tell people things all the time that I've learned through that. And now I have some Michelle ones too. Though Michelle, I've been to Broad Street back in the day through InterVarsity when we were doing a kind of a prayer and a vision walk around all the arts campuses.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah.
Very cool.
We're a connectional church, right? That's who we are as Presbyterians. And so I think just the joy of being able to have the space to be together with other individuals, not at a Presbyterian meeting, but where we can have smaller groups and get to know each other's churches and each other is always it's very powerful. I think we glean a lot from one another. We all each have a lot of divine wisdom within us. And so anytime that we can share that and not hoard it or think that it's competition, for me, always feels like it's a win. So thank you for being here and for sharing who you are and your church and your successes. And also don't be afraid to share your failures, because those are learnings too.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of failures, and they're funny stories too.
Yeah, share your salad buffet stories, like the
I love
one
the salad buffet one.
how the salad buffet was a total disaster for
Yeah.
for us at Broad Street. Like everyone's got a salad buffet story or 10.
On the we're a connectional, kind of church and stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and say on McKenna's behalf that your friends, spouses, partners, children, whoever's a ruling elder, if they are looking to connect with people from other churches, McKenna's got a few of our commissions that need some members, and it is a great way to, it's work, yeah, but it's more, Rob always comes back with more stories that he could bring back to our church from those meetings, from working with other people on a commission. So tell McKenna, or tell your ruling elders that they
Yes.
could be on a commission and meet with people.
Yes, I will pass that on. And Jane, I would be remiss if I didn't invite you to share. Did you want to say anything, or are you just feeling full of the brim? And yeah.
No, I've enjoyed the stories. I mean, there are lots of things that I could contribute, but I really enjoyed listening to the stories. I learned a lot.
Great.
If I can share just one thing I just started doing, we have this, I guess, bi-monthly newsletter that comes out. And I found out one of the older women, she's 90 in our congregation. I found out she years ago used to work or volunteer at an organization called SARC in Harford County. And I went up to her and I just said, can I go to your home? Can I just talk to you and interview you? And I wrote an article about her, and she was the first person in our county to, in her kitchen, started a hotline for abused women. And so the house, I mean, to me, that's even reaching within our own congregation. The hospitality is there too, that I never would have known about this. About this woman. She's amazing what she's done, and she's quiet, and I never would have known it. So if you ever hear about Joan Hodis, that's her.
Wow. It's like quiet heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Well, that seems like a good story to end our time on. Is there anyone who'd like to pray for us as we wrap up? I would be happy to. All right, let's pray together. God, you are doing so many good and important learnings and lovings in our lives and in the people that we have the privilege to pastor and minister to. We are grateful for the people who joined us tonight, for their deep care for their own congregations, for the way that you are working in and through their lives. We ask that you give all of us, whether we serve as a deacon formally, or we pastor, or we serve in other ministry capacity, the wisdom and the creativity to do your will, to welcome, to be uncomfortable, and to try new things, even though we will fail. We ask that you be with us as we go from this place. Please keep us healthy and bless us as we go about the rest of our week. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
This is the last one, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yes.
I
But be on
learned
the
a lot.
lookout. Be on the lookout for the fall season, the fall series.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
Okay.
Season 2 of Deacon
Season-
School coming
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, season 2 of Deacon School will be about dying well.
Oh. Okay.
Looking forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.